I'll bring you back some caramel popcorn the next time.
There you go, my wife will like it.
Feeling a surge of liberalism already. Jamie, are you the only warm-blooded person in this room, or what?
You know, it got really, really cold up there with the winds, so I guess I'm kind of used to it. It's 65 degrees in my apartment for a couple day or two.
Oh,
So.
Lord.
It's kind of warm downtown here, huh?
I went out there and shoveled some snow in front of the high school this morning with just a sweater on, and it wasn't that bad. So.
Just curious, what's the goal we're trying to set? 68, 65, 32?
Well, if you listen to Public Works, it's 60, but no, we're having problems with the heating system here because actually,
Oh, this isn't deliberate.
no, this is not deliberate. My
Not like the
office,
other
my office is nice and warm for whatever reason. I walked in here on Sunday because I had some paperwork to do. I had to come in on Saturday, and it was cold in here. And I thought, oh my God, do I have to call DPW to get in here and find out what's going on? And I go up into my office. It's nice and warm. Cheryl's office is nice and warm. So, but someone from DPW actually came in to check, and we're still working on what the problem is. We broke out some heaters that we had. It's not doing much good in a room this size. Now, if you all want to go down there and huddle around it. It's nice and warm back by the
Unless
wall.
you have not gathered, Glenn, we don't get along quite that well.
Yes, after
Just
listening
kidding.
to
Just
listening to the Taffy talk.
All right, enough joking. Clock is ticking, and Jamie is here and is up number one. So we probably won't take a full hour on this. So if you need a minute or two there, Jamie, to
Well, we got two topics.
yeah, but the other one maybe we'll.
Oh, I have coffee.
Taffy, saltwater taffy. That's what they're all chewing up there.
Oh, you want me to?
Yeah.
My mom told me not to speak with my mouth full.
This is President Biden's cat.
Yeah, our building's got a bunch of stuck zone valves. Everywhere. Oh, yeah, you guys are chasing them constantly.
Thank you very much.
Is that coffee still brewing back there? Can you tell?
Yeah, it's
Not
only got about
warm
that
you up.
much in it.
Oh, really?
It's pretty slow.
Oh,
Okay, whenever you're ready, Jamie is.
Well, thank you very much for an opportunity to come and speak with you this evening. I have two documents that I shared with Mr. Steckman. The first one was our board-approved capital priorities for this coming year. And again, this is not a full and complete list of all the projects that need to be taken care of. However, it's our highest need and the project that we've been working on the longest. So these have all been submitted, and they have actually all been ranked by the Department of Education. However, we now must wait for the legislature to determine how much funding will be allocated to the capital budget for education, because the governor's preliminary budget put no money in for this. So he's left it to the legislature to make that particular decision. So the first one on our list is a supplemental funding request for the roof replacement in adults. This project is
That's on
actually.
page eight. That's on page 8. Oh, okay. Oh, all right. Thank you, sorry. We're there.
Okay, so the roof replacement was actually, the original request was actually funded in 2018. That's the 2018-2019 school year was the superintendent in between Mr. Sean Arnold and myself. When I came into the position, and shortly thereafter, we lost our maintenance director, and we had some turnover for quite some time. So we weren't able to actually get any motion on that as far as completing whatever needs to be done, taking it out to bid. And then, of course, the following year, which was when we would get started on it, then we got COVID. So when we finally came back to it, of course, by then, when we actually got it ready, took it out to bid, which was the following year, we were in the middle of COVID, between COVID costs, inflation costs, everything like that. The bids that came back the first time were way outside the scope of what we had originally budgeted and been funded at. And we did some changes to it, tried to break it down into a base bid, some alternate bids instead to see what we could get done, took it out again, and this time the prices came back even higher. So we had a conversation with the Department of Education's Facilities Department about what are we going to do. We've got about $2.2 million awarded to us, but that's not going to cover the cost of replacing the roof. Our roof is at the end of its life. 30 years is your typical for a commercial roof. We're past that by about 5-6 years. We've got a lot of places that are leaking, and we've been patching, but it's kind of like whack-a-mole when it comes to the roof right now. So the department, the conversation suggested that we submit a supplemental funding request. It's actually discussed by the entire committee that actually oversees the facilities management, kind of a subcommittee of the State Board of Education, and they made the suggestion that a supplemental funding request be submitted. This has actually ended up ranked number 9 out of the 100+ projects in the state, which means that depending on how much money the governor allots or the legislature allots to that actual list, it is likely to get funded. So our big challenge, of course, is that, like I said, originally we were looking at approximately $2.2 million. So if we add these together, we're almost looking at $5.5 million now to replace the roof, so more than half. And the school district is responsible, according to the state's formula, for 30% of any funded project. So this is the dollar amount, but they will only give us 70% of that. We are responsible for 30%. So it is likely that this will get funded. We'll be able to get the roof replaced. However, that's going to take a massive chunk out of our CIP fund. That's just a reality. The next project, which is second on the list but was not funded particularly highly by the Department of Education's algorithm for whatever reasons, is addressing some of our security issues. This has become anytime we hear about a school shooting, there's always conversations about how secure are our buildings, what are we doing about, intruders or anything like that. And if you've been to both of the campuses, you know that it is very easy on both campuses for somebody to get into the building because neither one of them really requires. At the elementary school, you can go right past those glass those little glass partition there and make a left turn and be in the school. And if somebody isn't looking for you, going after you. And then at the high school, it's even worse because you can walk in the door and be completely out of any eye shot from the office, make a right turn, and head down to the junior high. So we had conversations around, we combined this with some look at the entrances for both schools. This is a project where we would probably do some door replacement. A lot of the doors out there are quite old. We have some door issues that we're working on. All the buildings all need some doors that need to be replaced or door frames that need to be replaced. But basically making both of them with a vestibule. So the elementary school already has 2 sets of doors, and the second set of doors would basically latch, and they would be buzzer controlled. So you'd walk in, after a certain point in time, those doors would just close, and you'd have to buzz yourself in. There'd be another camera in there. The secretary, whoever could see who you were, said who you were, and then buzz you in. Okay, at the high school, we would have to install a second set of doors, because right there inside the vestibule, the doors are gone. So we would install a second set of doors and put in the cameras and the buzzer system. Make sure that the ADA openers are working. Some of them don't work well. At the high school, it's both the bus doors and the front doors. And then we'd have to do some concrete work out at Belt. So at one side by the bus doors, they took the concrete out with the intention of replacing it. However, they never get around to that. So it's very problematic to get any of our students in a wheelchair to get in and out of that door because it's just quite a drop or up. We had an issue where we had a call out from the ambulance department to go out there, and they had difficulty getting somebody on a stretcher in and out as well. So it's an issue that would be taken care of. We were hoping, because this is a priority from our board, to utilize, and that was the request that I had submitted previously that I can come back to, about utilizing the reimbursement funds that came back from DEED on the ACSA restroom remodel project. And the next two, the fire alarm replacement and the generator replacement, have been submitted multiple times. They were here when I started 4 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago. We've submitted trying to get them done. We've done a little bit of work on the fire alarm. What kind of work that they look for is they look for their engineers coming out and doing some. Do we have some condition surveys? Do we have any work done as far as any architect or engineering actual work towards the project? So that means the district has to put money in it up front to try to help have a better package and improve the scores for it. So the fire alarm is a system that was installed in 1987. We have to source our parts sometimes off eBay because it's an obsolete system. The manufacturer isn't even around anymore. So far, it's been hanging in there, but it does need to be completely replaced at some point in time, and it needs to come with a lot of changes in the fire equipment. The last one, of course, is the replacement for the generator out at Nome Belts. Okay, the generator is too small. It overheats. So last Christmas, we had the horrible storm, and we had the 70-mile-an-hour winds, and the power was out by Belts, and we were almost 72 hours without power. And that meant we had to have one of our maintenance guys in there on a cot, because if the generator overheats and shuts down, you have to wait till it cools and fire it back up again. So it's just too small for the system there. And there's some other electrical issues that need to be taken care of at the campus because it's just old. The system needs to be redone. So the conversation around asking that the district be allowed to retain the funds for the restroom remodel reimbursement project. So as it is, allowing us to retain those funds does not count towards the cap that the city's contribution, because capital improvement, it's not a donation to general funds. So it was intended for a capital project, the funds retained, we'd like to retain for another capital project. And the good news about this project is we would, again, we only received 70% back of what we actually put in for. So we're going to get about $250,000 back off of the remodel project roughly, which would leave us a little short for this project. So the district would have to put some money in out of its CIP fund to complete it, but then we can turn around and submit that one to reimbursement back to the state as well. So it's kind of like a little bit more bang. Otherwise, since the money was spent on behalf of the district and it's been sent to the district by the Department of Education, then we would have to basically cut a check back to the city for those funds instead. So that's kind of where we are for our capital projects for this year. So are there any questions on any of these individual projects or the whole process regarding our request?
Maybe just, you said these had all been ranked and number 9 was the first one. Do you have the rank? You said that these projects have all been ranked by the district, by DOE already.
Yes,
You told us the first one was number 9.
9.
What about the other ones?
I don't
If you
have,
don't have it, that's
off the top
fine,
of my
but-
head, the fire alarm, that actually the one that scored the next best is the fire alarm, but it's down there around, I think, like 21 or 22. The generator is not far below that, but the our ADA improvement one is scored pretty low. I think it's down in like the 50s. And generally, I would tell people, if you're not in the top 10, especially the other issue is that many of the other projects in the top 10 of the list are fairly high dollar projects. So last year, we were actually kind of surprised that we got the money back for the boiler. Because we did the boiler work that we did. We replaced and completely refurbished one of the boilers, and then the restroom remodel. They didn't rank that high. But what happened was, after they kind of got all of their money out, saw what hadn't been spent, so they ended up having a little extra money. And so they looked for some smaller projects that were easy, because a reimbursement project is super easy. It's already done. The project is finished. They sent the agreement. We send here's all of our backup for how we spent everything. We followed all the rules, and then they just cut us a check. They know exactly how much it's going to cost. These other projects are not done yet, so there's always the iffy about exactly how much money will need to be spent. And sometimes projects come in under budget. Lately it's been projects that haven't been. I think some projects have come back in because they're in the pickle like we had with the roof. They couldn't get it done for the budget that they had.
So these numbers have been up to like today's costs? Or-
Yes. So when we do the submit, we did make inflationary adjustments for all of these costs when we submitted them to the state.
Cameron, you're the only one not in the room here. A couple of hands moving, but I'll call on you first. Okay, great. Thank you. All right, Mark.
Just one quick question. How much is currently in your CIP fund?
We've got about 3 million right now. Okay, and if the roof project goes through, that's going to take out more than half.
And that 3 million includes that pot of money that came back from the state that you're.
Not yet,
Not yet.
not yet.
Can you remind us again how
So
much?
some of those are already, anytime we submit these projects to the state and they score well enough, we actually basically, out of that money, we basically set, for example, we've had $667,000 kind of sitting as, earmarked out of that money because that was our original participating share in the original club. So, we can't, spend those. So we have time. We always have 5 years. When the state funds us for something, it's a 5-year agreement. So we have 5 years from that fall to get the project finished and everything submitted to the state. So we do have a little bit of time over time to gather the rest of the money that we would need for a project. But the challenge is that with all the projects that we've been really trying hard to address some long-standing issues up there, we usually typically put into the fund about $200,000 in an average year just for CIP. And we were lucky several years ago, we had some real underspending and we dumped a bunch of money into CIP for that. But since then, we've put about 200,000 in. We've easily been spending 200,000 back out. So it hasn't grown. It's been pretty flat for several years.
Scott, please.
So of the 3 million that you have in your CIP fund, I assume you have amounts within that 3 million earmarked for various projects, right?
Correct.
And if I did the math right, this, the priority, which will likely get funded this year, is the roof project. So that's about, 1.6, somewhere in there. So that's going to eat up about half of your CIP fund.
Correct.
What's going to happen what's the rest of it earmarked for?
Well, the rest of it, for example, is earmarked these other projects. We have to figure out what's our 30%, try to make sure we have money in case they get funded. We also look at any other larger capital, but they're not huge, but they're, bigger ticket items. So
These three, the
yeah,
remaining.
there's other projects that we are working on that don't go to the state. The state has a floor. Now it has to be at least $50,000 for us to submit a project to the state at all. So if we have smaller things that are still capital projects, those do come out of the CIP fund.
So in that 3 million, do we get that as part of the annual budgeting process? Kind of a breakdown of your CIP, just so we can have a good understanding of kind of what you got in the hopper?
We haven't, but we certainly can because Genevieve and I, we keep track of that and
Yeah, that
what
would be-
we earmarked
That
for.
wouldn't be too much of a problem. It'd be nice to see that as part of the budget process. Okay, here's the 3 million in your CIP, here's where we've got allocated. So you've already banked essentially the 30% of these other three of your top 4 priorities, correct? In the CIP?
Yeah, the ones that we're pretty sure, like the roof, we definitely have to set that one aside.
Right.
And the secure access is the other one that, even though we're not likely to get funded,
You
that's
can
the
move that
more
around as
priority.
priorities change.
Some of them, if we know they're probably down the road a little bit, keep them in the back of our mind, but we might encumbering the funds now for a project that might not get funded for 4 years or something would make a whole lot of sense.
Right, and what's the risk if you have a critical project that needs to be done, like this, the 328,000 for the ADA improvements? Even if it doesn't get approved by the state, what's the risk of you basically taking the funds out of your CIP, getting the work done now to make sure, and then applying for it retroactively? Is the risk that you won't get approved and you're going to have to eat the full 70%?
Yeah, so we're only going to get 70% back. That's the best we're ever going to get. So we understand that. So if we do something up front, as far as the risk, well, you have to keep applying. If you go past a certain amount of time and you stop applying for it, it drops off the list and can't go back and do it again. So that's the only big challenge with a reimbursement project. You have to continually submit it. If you let it go too long, it's too old, then they say, well, it's just too bad, it's so sad, and now you're responsible for it. You've already spent the money.
Is that a realistic option, or is that doable by just taking the funds to take care of the ADA project now out of the CIP, paying 100%, and then requesting reimbursement, and hopefully at some point?
That's happened in the past. Some districts will do that. They just say, this is such a high priority, we don't have time to wait. So we're going to continue to submit and hope at some point in time. Things actually do score a little higher because they're reimbursement requests, because again, like I said, the state knows exactly how much money they're going to have to spend out on that project. They're not likely to come back and ask for more money or anything like that. So.
Yeah, because I mean, you listed it as your second priority, and I don't think anybody's going to disagree with you that it's important. I'm just wondering if it makes sense to use your existing CIP, especially if it's not going to get used for other projects that are farther down the state's list. Use that and then continue to chase the reimbursement.
But we have to keep in mind that there's always something else that comes up. For example, we had the issue with the sewer. You guys remember that a couple of years ago when we had the problem with the sewer at the elementary school, and that was $140,000 that we had to spend. We couldn't say, nope, sorry, no school, no toilets, no school, no problem. So we really couldn't do that. So we have to be very careful too. We always have to keep some in reserve because there's always emergencies. So we're looking at, we also have to try to project in the future. What else are we projecting for? Like we have a 22-year-old loader that's we're putting a lot of money into it. So, it's running for now, but at some point in time, we're going to have to replace that. And that's $400,000 in today's prices. So it's always a challenge for us. That's kind of our savings project. We have to balance what's the priority of the need and how much. And there's some things that we can do partially as we go. We can make progress each year towards something. It doesn't, there's some things that we don't have to do all at the same time. We can say, okay, we can do that part of the project, as long as we're following the deeds, rules for procurement and bids and everything like that. We're tracking that. When we get to the final project, even if it's taken us 3 years to finish it, we can still turn around and submit that and ask for the reimbursement back.
One of the questions that came up when this was in the last council meeting packet I was curious whether or not there was a construction timeline that was critical to basically fund this or approve this prior to the budget process taking place. Is that,
You know, we do have to keep in mind the construction windows, you know, and ideally, you know, we are already almost in February. You know, typically when things, you know, it really depends on the size of the project. So, you know, something like this, which is kind of a relatively small project, a lot of it's going in for equipment and not as much labor. Some of it's in for cameras and things like that. But it's important for us to know so that we can make sure that we get, you know, RFPs out and everybody has time to get whatever that they need, get it up here, barge. You know, we don't want to rip off the doors at the elementary school and not have them ready for the start of school. So,
I guess, final question. So if this is a critical item, the school, Nome Public Schools has the ability to fund it internally and waiting if the budget process takes a couple months to get through this body. Is that fair?
well, and part of it was to see, you know, we made the request to the council and
Yep.
to see what the council's response was. And if the answer is no, we want our the 70% back, then we have to go back and talk about, okay, we want to spend the money ourselves.
Yeah, I don't think anybody said no. I was just thinking it's.
I was gonna recommend that this be part of the budget amendment that you will see first introduced at your next meeting. So this gives them the time to get the RFP out and also start sourcing the materials, because I know how long it's taking us to get materials, you know, for almost anything that we need up here for some of our projects, and it's now into the months. So my recommendation to the council was for you to consider this in your next, the budget amendment coming up for this year.
Kelly, being these are school things and you're our school rep, do you have any comments on this?
I agree that the roof needs to be replaced. We have classrooms with the ceiling tiles taken down with the trash under it, collecting water. So it's definitely in need of some TLC. I also think that we need some help, kind of just in sanitation, I guess. There have been multiple times since I've been in high school and we've seen like rodents running across the floor. So I do think that needs to probably be addressed just for safety and health measures. I haven't really talked with anyone, but it's just something that's been kind of also more common in the last few years is that people are noticing mice inside the school with like voles. So I do agree that the facility is old and it needs some work done to it.
Those aren't Mike Levinson's old, or Dan Levinson's old white rats that are still running around the building, are they?
I don't know what they are.
Sig,
Yeah, so obviously there's a lot of money that needs to go into fixing Nome belts in particular, and I'm wondering at what point do we just request a new school and or what is the process for that? Because I would love to see the high school moved into town for a number of reasons. I mean, access from the community, the fact that there is so much not so great, I mean, some good, but some not so great history associated with Nome belts as a boarding school facility back in the day. So I'd just be curious, and this is kind of beyond the scope of what we're talking about right now, but at what point do we try to get a new school and bring it closer to town?
We would have to look at the criteria for state funding for new schools. Now, honestly, right now, most of the schools that they're looking at for funding for a new school or moving school construction is usually either because of overcrowding, more students that you can really generally accommodate, or if you're talking like catastrophic failure of like the building. So, we've got schools right now down there in the Kuskokwim and up here as well. I know that are on the banks, and they're worried about them literally falling into the river, falling into the ocean. So those are going to be higher up on the priority list for a while. The only other way to do it is to figure out how to fund it ourselves, which would be a very large bond. And I don't know how much it's gonna cost, it would cost to build another facility of that size, and we have to have a place too. If you look at it, it's what, 50,000 square feet or something like that. It's huge, so.
One of the things, I mean, years ago, the decision consciously was made to not seek a new school and to keep Nome Belts High School. And the reason for that, there were numerous, but one of the big ones was that we started looking at, gee, we would like to have a new school. And they said, and I'm just picking numbers out of the air right now. You have a 100,000 square foot building out there right now. If you go to want a new one, you'll get a 40,000 square foot building. That you will not replace the square footage of that building the next time around. And there was a period of time after it went from William Belts to Nome Belts that there was what was called an excess space payment that was made. The state actually paid the city of Nome and the district a premium above and beyond what the costs normally, would have been, just because we had so much more space than fit into their regular deal. And so, I mean, the community looked at it. I mean, it was a big discussion, not just by the schools and as well weighing in on it. And it was like, gee, it sure is nice to have this dormitory facility over here, so that we can house all these regional sporting events when we have people coming in. We also need excess space for other classrooms. There was, that's the district office ended up in there. It also was, if we hung on to that thing, the portion of the complex is actually leased to DOT. That's money that goes into the school's operating budget, and we would lose out in that opportunity. And then, just a side note is, okay, we've got a real nice life-saving facility, AKA pool, that is closed right now anyway. But moving the school to town, you're not going to get a new pool associated with it. And so those were a number of the things, that there were just so many other opportunities. The space outside being able to be used for cross-country and those types of activities. And so I'm just telling you what the history was, but it was a conscious decision. And I know I've heard Senator Lyman Hoffman talk about the schools that he needs in his districts because, they kind of seem to burn down for some reason, and that those replacement schools, just however, tens of millions of dollars, are needed just to get somebody back to a school facility that, if Nome was to decide, gee, we think we need a new school and it would be more cost effective to do so, there definitely is a process for doing that. But that was just, at that point in time, it's like, we like the fact that we've got this excess space that can provide other opportunities to us. And, that's when we started going down the road of replacing the cafeteria, putting in the ADA, and doing those types of improvements to the facility, building out in building D, I think they call it, the dorm or whatever, the alternative school, and a bunch of stuff like that. So there's definitely a process, but that is the reason why there was a conscious decision not to request that. And if we had requested it back there, we might have been 70 on the list. I don't know that we're higher than 40 at this point in time. But the question certainly could be asked, but it was conscious.
Yeah, and also, obviously there's a lot of factors that go into it, but I think from the standpoint of engagement between the community and students, I see that lacking in the high school. not of the fault of the teachers or anything, it's just physically being so far away. And then I worry that students who miss the bus also, and their families don't have cars or transportation. And so I feel like there's some important community aspects that should be factored in there, even if financially it may not make the most sense. But obviously that's a whole nother can of worms, and I will be quiet.
And then, I don't know, just on other, we ended up getting some funding back finally on the state reimbursement on school bond indebtedness. And they pay, that used to be a standard thing that the school was paying, the bonded indebtedness on behalf of the municipalities. That went away for several years. It came back in here just last year, and they paid, back a year or two on the things, but there was a lot of negotiation, I guess, that went on in that process too, and there was a reasonable number of the legislators that said, no, communities need to pay for their own schools. We pay to operate them, but as far as the facilities are, those are community. So again, just another thing. Let's on the bond debt reimbursement, because there definitely is a component. It's only going to be a 70-30 deal, and I'd say I'm just picking a number. It would be $50 million to build a new school, probably higher than that.
Probably, yeah.
And so, a lot of
Maybe a lot smaller. I don't think we're ever going to persuade anybody that we need 3 huge shops. That was originally built because of the intent of the facility. So, so we have the auto shop, the wood shop, and the metal shop. They're all huge. They're all beautifully equipped, unfortunately. So we would be lucky if we got probably one shop that was supposed to do all of it, because that's more typical nowadays for the size of the school we are. So, yeah, there's definitely a give and take. So it would be great, but the school bond, I think there's still a moratorium on any of that for a while as well. So it was nice that they did do some back pay back to the municipalities. That was some unexpected revenue, but yeah, going forward, and I don't know what the city balance is on their school bonds. They still have to pay.
I think they're actually paid off.
I think Nikki can answer that better than I can, and she's on the phone.
Nikki, do we still have any bond debt on the elementary school, or was that retired? Okay, all right. Okay, thank you. Then I guess just looking at this, the roof is a facility thing. To me, it looks like these other things kind of fall into a category, the broad category of life safety. Are there any in the ranking system? Is there any special consideration for those types of things? Or
Yes, there is actually a category called life safety. It's a very complex algorithm with all the different points. So you get points for how recent your condition survey is, which we don't like, because basically it's taken a while for some of these projects. They don't fund, and then after a while you have to go out and spend more money, pay an engineer or someone to come out and do another survey. So it's more money we have to put in for projects we haven't done. How we rank them, priority. So if we say this is our number 1 project, that gets a little extra points and so on down the line. There's any number of things. What category does it fall under? And they have to talk about is it impinging on the ability of students to attend the school and actually engage? Is it basically taking away instructional space? It's a very complex algorithm that, for the number of points that you get. So.
And do you know the transformers that are buried down there, how big they are? Have any idea?
I'm sorry, the transformers next to the,
For the high school that are entombed underneath concrete, yeah, okay.
I know we did have to replace one transformer, very, very old. We had to bring somebody up because our electrician on staff, it's like he's a journeyman electrician
Right.
licensed, but he said, this is above my pay grade.
Right.
And we had to bring somebody in. That was the one that transferred in between when the power went out and kicked the system back onto the emergency generator. We were having problems with that, so we did have to replace that one.
Well, and give the spiel on what it is with transformers, if you would, right now.
so pretty horrible. We're looking at timelines for new transformer orders. Pole mounts are at 2 years and pad mounts are over 4 years from time of orders. The ones that we had a big order in mind last spring and we decided not to pursue it because of course the prices were going to go down. They didn't go down. In fact, later on in November, got an email saying, hey, if you're still interested in buying these things that you gave us a PO for, here's the new price. So it's exciting times.
I guess I just worry that, you know, the loss of that power in that facility, then we will need a new school because the whole damn thing is gonna freeze up. And,
I tell people I have a vested interest because I actually live in the building. So
Right.
any issues, I experience them. If it's cold or anything like that, I live them. So I advocate for it. Plus, you know, we have people who live in the dorms and we have people who live in the teacher housing. It's all in the same system. So anytime things go down, we're all in the same boat. I'm trying to figure out how to plug in space heaters, keep ourselves warm, etc. So the other fun thing about that generator, of course, is that it was built inside kind of an attachment to our facilities building, and the damper works very poorly. So when it kicks in, all exhaust back into, and everyone has to evacuate until they go back there and pry that damper open. That's also the fun part.
any questions further on? The school district stuff? Okay, I think we're good. I appreciate it, Jamie. And
Of our legislative priorities here, just so you know. So we were asked to put a dollar amount on how much money we want from the state. So I did a little calculation that it did say we would like the BSA to go up to 7,000. That's about $1,100 increase. Anchorage School District has come up with their own figure, which is 960. That's not that far off. Maybe we'll get lucky and get half that. It should be huge because we've been flat funded for so long. That would allow us to, deal with a lot of the costs that we have. This is a negotiations year for us with our teachers. So we're going to be going into negotiations soon, and unfortunately, we're probably not going to have an answer from the legislature before the school year ends. That's not. I seriously doubt that's going to happen, but I might be surprised. So we're very lucky in that we have some good voices in the legislature for us this year. Neil is on the finance committee again. Donnie's also on the finance committee in the Senate, and of course, Liz is in the Senate, where she is the chair of the Senate.
And anyway, it was kind of interesting with the House and the organization on the thing that I can't remember what they called it, but tri-chair or something that in order to fit people in, there are actually now 3 chair of the finance committee, including a representative female from Wasilla, I can't remember her name, Bryce Edgman, who's a good friend for Nome, and then and Neil. So there was some definite jockeying there to get that to happen, but everything we still hear is the big fight's going to be the PFD. How much people want there, and the rest will go by the wayside. So. All right, well, if there aren't any further questions, thank you, and we'll move on to the cities. And all of your projects are directly submitted by the school district into CAPSIS. Correct.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie.
Thank you.
What's the turnover rate for teachers?
Average.
They have to make.
Yeah, I figured it was the 25 there.
It's
Go across the street and get some Baileys.
But there are some things also.
Hand warmers too.
Right there.
Have a cup, thank you.
They're aware. There are
Yeah.
a lot of things. in there.
Somebody.
Cole, I said this was a your idea. It was
Half a cup, yeah.
Sure, yeah, just have.
below temperatures.
Okay, so the cities, thing, B and C under new business, which then brings us to page 34 and 35, we're following along. Oh, we're still going? Now talking about what the cities side of it is. So, Glenn.
Gotta go to where we are in the packet. Well, you know, a lot of what we have discussed as a priority, and I think it would actually benefit us potentially a little financially, is the teacher housing and public safety housing. But as you can see on page 34, state incentives for new housing development to also go into with what the incentives that you have put into place. Water and sewer upgrades, road paving and dust control for health and safety, utility tank farm relocation. The covered multi-use recreational structure is the ice hockey rink cover, and new teacher housing. We haven't put these in any direct list, but I would, if we were going to put them prioritized, I would say the number 1 and 2 is new teacher housing and water and sewer upgrades and line extensions. Because with those line extensions, it allows us to take lots that would either have to have wells drilled or septic systems also carved out. That would help there. And there are, sections of the community that maybe even we just got a water line out to them because they already do have good septic systems. That would be a benefit. The Emergency Preparedness Center upgrades is really the Nome Rec Center. That project is growing in cost. We will probably not have it out to bid this fall because we've been working on back and forth with the architects and the engineers. And of course, the other issue, as I jump around a little bit, is always road paving. Last year we put $3 million in and we didn't get anything. And just so you know, I have a person ready to hire as a contract for a grant writer. So that'll give us a little extra oomph. Now, what we have here for the state legislature, the CAPSIS has to be in by January 31st. So we are going to be working with 8 days to get this entered into CAPSIS. The federal priorities, we met with Jay Stern today. He will actually, what we pick, and he gave us some guidance. He will help write the information that will be submitted to our congressional delegation. Now, one of the things we also discussed, we may have a couple small projects that we want to put into CAPSIS just so it's there, just in case some money comes up. But we really should be making sure our legislators understand what is our number one priority, and if there are funds left over from something, that we do have a couple other projects to move forward with. John, did I cover that?
I think you did, Glenn. I guess, part of our discussion too, is, you can see over here on, the federal side that, we're talking about a reduction in the cost share portion. And, that 90-10, legislation did pass. But, still, generally, we would like to see more of the funding coming from the feds than are coming from here. So this reduction doesn't talk about the 90-10 deal, but just still looking at additional funding the Corps may need to match just because of the change in the formula, as well as then what's occurred as a result of their estimating. We did talk about the potential that, at some point in time, there's going to need to be some additional state funding put into it, but that we wouldn't include that on this current list, but once a little more. Once we get additional information, the Corps finishes all of their regurgitation of the numbers, that a presentation would be made to the legislature just saying, based on everything we know today, this is how it looks like the project is lining out. There is still phase 2 and phase 3 that were not included in this first deal. And so we do expect that there will be a request again in the future, but thank you very much for the $175 million from last year, and that's going to get us moving. Finding a nice way of saying, you probably haven't seen the last of us on this in this regard.
And a lot of this is directly related to inflation. With what the inflation rates have been over the last year and a half, plus the high cost of even doing anything up here.
Scott?
When we submit these state priorities, only one of them has a dollar figure associated with it.
We'll have dollar figures.
Okay, so we don't know what those numbers are. And I guess the second question is it possible to get more of them if we stack up like two smaller ones at the top of the list? I mean, does the size of the request have anything to do with it? Or just curious if there's a strategic way to not game the system, but, increase our chances of success.
Well, I would argue, as John has heard me argue, strategically, I believe in going with fewer and trying to make sure the legislature understands these are the critical ones. That doesn't mean that we can't do the CAPSIS. The dollar numbers, the teacher housing is probably, I'm waiting for that number right now is from Jamie, because she's going to get an updated number, is probably closer to 14 million. The covered multi-recreational structure is still probably about 1.4, 1.5. John, I know that you and Ken have the utility tank farm relocation.
Yeah, and we're still working on what those numbers actually will be and what potential funding sources are already available, but that's a $15 or so million undertaking.
The rec center is probably going to be in the neighborhood of 2 2.1 to 2.4 million. Now, you do have money set aside. I mean, that's where the negotiations may come down to, is say, the city of Nome is willing, can you give us this and we can put this in? It's the same thing with teacher housing. It's anticipated, part of this was always anticipated, if not all of it in the beginning when I got here, was going to be revenue bonds. So, but if the state wanted to come and give us $14 million, which I don't believe that's going to happen, but, you know, if we went in and said, look, to the Alaska Housing Finance Corporation, they have some grant money. We're told it's $20 million. Would they match, you know, us 50-50 to do this construction, which would, you know, be around $7 million?
So it's not like the schools were just 70-30 kind of hard and fast. That's the reimbursement rate. It's really more subject to.
No, the school district is different.
Yeah, and that's what this is pretty much open in terms of, hey, what's the best deal we can get, the negotiation and all that.
And that's why we have a lobbyist who works on our behalf. And she tries to make sure that we're aware of things, or when the governor would like something and he would like to try something, they typically are now coming to Nome, you know, to say, would the Nome community willing to work on this?
So John, I wasn't listening when he said the state, the port's not on this list because you're gonna just ask for money anyway, or?
Kind of, sort of, in that, you know, I think, you know, this is kind of deferring to Wendy and her expertise on the thing, that, you know, there still is more work on the core side to be done to come up with what the actual, you know, total cost will be that we need. And rather than us say, okay, well, today it looks like we need another 17 million. And then, you know, the next year, oh, oops, now it looks like it's, so seeing, you know, just to be able to, you know, move forward with the project as it is, and then, you know, see how it all plays out when the contract comes around. You know, I think everybody is feeling comfortable that there's going to be sufficient funding already to let the contract for phase one, but you know, that there's just going to be more that pops up, and rather than nickel-in and diming on the thing, that it just made a little more sense to. And to Scott's question on, does it make sense to put a few little smaller things in there? Yeah, it does. And they're usually are thrown in some things that if we anticipate, or I mean, that we actually need and are smaller dollar numbers. So if there is any kind of capital appropriation or allocation to individuals, that we would have a project on this. And I can use a fire truck as an example. You know, one of the later fire trucks that we got just happened at the very last minute that Richard was able to work that in to the system. In the final hours, we got a fire truck on it, but it was only because you know, it hadn't been on our list, but we had got it into the CAPSIS and, you know, into the system on just you know, here's another need. You know, we're not pushing it right now, but sometimes they are looking for just smaller things to grab.
And one other 5-second question for a 10-second answer. The new teacher housing complex is under the city. It's not a school district project. I thought is it because
This has always been in a, well, it should say new teacher housing plus public safety housing. So that language has got to be addressed. But this has always been a joint project because we were hoping that it would show that the city and the school district were working together. That's also where some of the funding for the Denali Commission came, because it's been so long since this process began. The Denali Commission gave a $500,000 grant through the Alaska Housing Financing Corporation to begin the design phases of the building. And we are somewhere in the neighborhood, as Jamie and I spoke the other day, 95. But I really would say that you pick 3, 4, maybe 5, and then we can submit the other ones through CAPSIS. I mean, one of the issues is we keep on being told there's federal infrastructure money to pave roads, but I haven't seen how it's going to affect us. And we're not talking about rebuilding roads. We're just talking about putting an asphalt cap on it.
So you're saying that when we get to this on the agenda, you want us suggest that we pick 3 or 4?
I would prefer that way. I mean, we can put in, for instance, the ice rink, as I would think as a CAPSIS request. We want to make sure we're sending the proper signals that and I understand this, that we are committed to this project, even though, the house has been moved there. The skating rink is going there after this winter. And, we're working with them on, using some of the funds from NSEDC to rebuild the rink. Whether they build the sidewalls, or they go out and buy used sidewalls or new sidewalls for the rink.
Well, compared to some of the lists and pages that we've had on these in the past, they've been much lengthier. We've also had them much shorter. But I think that, generally this is a pretty concise list and would give anything having to do with housing, and we might be able to see how to work that in. No, they need to stay separate. And the reason that the teacher housing, public safety housing is on the city side is that the city anticipates selling some revenue bonds associated with it. The school district can't sell revenue bonds. So, I guess there was, back and forth with our lobbyists on it, and essentially after those meetings, Brian was working on his computer as we were talking, and the language that we forgot to tell him was the public safety in that last one. So. Yeah, go ahead.
Cameron, the number has to be revised. There is a pre-COVID number and a number that came in much higher. And we are actually we're waiting for the architect and engineer's estimate. So we think it's maybe closer to 14 million. That number will have to be corrected.
Okay, if there aren't any further questions, do we need 2 minutes here to stretch legs in between and then go on to the regular meeting? And we're all sitting here freezing, so we're not going to stay here forever. I'm going to step away for 30 seconds.
Your fault, Cole.
Trying for a snow dance.
They thought this was a planned effort.
Reducing heating costs, it makes sense. You just turn the electricity on now.
Well, I got tired of hearing complaints
Good.
on Friday when we were Thursday and Friday, and I kept on saying, we do have electric heaters, even though I knew I was going to incur the wrath of my public works director. So when I came in on Sunday, I said, I'm getting these things out because I'm not going to hear it tomorrow morning when they all come in.
Okay, thank you.
But it's supposed to go up to 20 by Friday. With that comes snow, but it's temperature's going up.
We've looked at it and winds definitely take way more heat out of the building than the ambient temperature, so.
Every crack we got in here right now is
Especially with old buildings like we have here.
my house.
We get, sometimes people say, hey man, how come I'm burning so much heat?
Yeah.
Even the temperatures are pretty warm, especially like as we get closer to spring, sometimes people burn actually more fuel than it's.
Like that.
You look at me like, yeah, I know what you're talking about.
I was gonna try and put the laptop and open up that packet, but it's not connected. City Hall, that's like a separate one.
New hangar burn a lot of fuel.
For some reason.
For heat.
In for heat, and then we have modines to catch
Check it up
when
when
the
you
door.
open the doors and stuff.
Looked lately, but it wasn't, a lot less than that.
Yeah, and that's not.
Is that right? Yeah. You guys probably open it quite a bit. Maybe not.
Try to do it twice a day. The new hangar,
Yeah, right.
just when all the planes go out,
Yeah, oh, you do it
And
all
then-
the time and.
then at night when they come back, stack
Okay,
it.
countdown, you got 5 minutes, go.
Yeah, shoot, when they stack that thing, it's like 35
Take one of
minutes.
the small.
35 minutes just because
That's a big door.
you're making, you're playing Tetris every night.
You turn it up before you open the doors.
Everything's set. You don't touch anything. It's all set. It's easier that way.
But that info raise is probably expensive to install, but definitely getting your money for it on
There's
that. Sure.
like 3.5 miles of tanks under there or something they said.
Sure.
He makes the call.
Yeah.
Well, it's nice you're building on all plot ground up there. The airport.
Yeah, had a little bit of even and hoeing, but
Probably not a whole lot. They're all mine areas out there.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
I guess they
We
just
got a little bit
a
settled.
little bit.
maybe
Yeah.
when we're adopting this, that.
Not so much this winter, last winter.
Yeah, you can make some, is that right? Why don't you make some motions?
Hasn't been
They'll be
too bad.
presented in person.
Well, or we're gonna,
Yeah.
drive home some of these
Right.
requests.
Yeah.
Mark, you found the station.
Yep.
John's keeping you well fed.
I actually have a fresh box I need to bring in here. Riding around in the back.
Sure, there's some letter.
From last I did her on.
I think they are, but I have fresh ones, so.
They're frozen, definitely frozen now.
Right.
It helps keep them longer, right?
That's right.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. If we are ready, today is Monday, January 23, 2023. The time is 7:13. And I will call the Nome Common Council to order, regular meeting of this date. Mr. Clerk, would you call the roll to establish a quorum?
Councilmember Henderson.
Here.
Councilmember Doug Johnson.
Here.
Councilmember Mark Johnson.
Here.
Councilmember Martinson.
Here.
Councilmember Piscoya. Councilmember Topcock.
No.
Youth Representative Miller.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Moving on to approval of agenda. Is there a motion to adopt the agenda?
Adopt the agenda for women.
Second. Councilmember Doug Johnson, Councilmember Henderson. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Councilmember Doug Johnson.
Yes.
Councilmember Mark Johnson.
Yes.
Councilmember Martinson.
Yes.
Councilmember Piscoya. Councilmember Topcock. Councilmember Councilmember Henderson.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. That moves us on then to approval of minutes. January 9, 2023. Is there a motion to adopt these minutes as submitted?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Councilmember Mark Johnson, Councilmember Martinson. Unless there's objection, roll call, please.
Councilmember Mark Johnson.
Yes.
Councilmember Martinson.
Yes.
Councilmember Piscoya. Councilmember Topcott. Councilmember Henderson.
Yes.
Councilmember Doug Johnson.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Down to page 16, we have a letter from Micah Haas concerning tax forgiveness on a boat. Mr. Clerk, what's the word here?
So our records indicate, as he claimed, that he has not, he moved his boat. He claims to have moved his boat out of city limits. We do not have any payments for the years that he has. We also do not have any declarations or letters to close out or appeals for Board of Equalization. I take it at face value. I've been sending him delinquent bills for a while now.
And the value of this is probably not huge.
Less than $200. I don't recall off the top of my head, though.
Thank you. Is there a motion to grant the tax forgiveness for lot 5580 based on the circumstances enumerated in the November 14, 2022 letter from Mr. Micah Huss?
Motion.
I'll second.
Thank you. Councilmember Doug Johnson, Councilmember Henderson. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Councilmember Martinson.
Yes.
Councilmember Piscoya. Councilmember Topcock. Councilmember Henderson.
Yes.
Councilmember Doug Johnson.
Yes.
Councilmember Mark Johnson.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you, and I apologize. I should have asked you for your recommendation, but I was thinking you were leaning in this direction. You're okay with it?
It's fine.
Okay. All right. Next, AML with regard to a program update. And it's from the Insurance Association. Yes.
So this is just a little bit of foreshadowing as we are going into the budgeting process. I do expect increases in insurance this year. We should be getting those sometime in early May. And as of the December AML meeting, I have now been elected as the chairperson of AML-JIA.
Cool. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So we'll get the Friends of the Chair discount.
We better move on here to the next letter here from Nikolai Ivanov. Nikolai doesn't like daylight savings time.
Nobody does.
Next communication is from AMCO. And that those do happen, not usually right in the name of the department. Beverage dispensary license application has been filed by Airport Pizza to have the license renewed. Does the council wish to take any action on this? Seeing none, the next communication is from the State of Alaska National Floodplain Program Coordinator. And this is noting that he was present to assist the city in some of the nuances of the program so that it can be better administered by the city, I think was the gist of that.
And two of our staff will be going down. Harmony was up here and has been in communication and training with Cheryl Thompson and with Cliff McHenry.
All right, next communication is a flyer having to do with the fact that there was rabies confirmed in a red fox found here in Nome here a week or so ago. And urging caution and listing some steps that you can take to hopefully help dissuade the fox from coming into the area. But you are encouraged to contact NPD or animal control and not take chances with your health and any action by the fox to you. That then brings us on to citizens' comments. Invite members of the public that would like to address the council. Please come forward, state your name for the record. And you can talk for 45 minutes tonight if you wish. Seeing no takers on that, you get another opportunity for a shorter duration a little later in the meeting. And that brings us then to unfinished business, which is ordinance 230101. Mr. Clerk, will you read that by title for the second time?
023-0101, an ordinance of the Nome Common Council, Nome, Alaska, amending Nome Code of Ordinances 2.30.040, reducing the number of members of the Public Safety Advisory Commission.
Thank you. The time is now 7:22. The council stand in recess to take public testimony on this ordinance. Are there members of the public who would like to address it? Seeing no indication, call the council back into session. And while there's lots of words on these pieces of paper, just restating the ordinance as it exists. The section dealing with the number of members is 2.30.040A. I see where that's struck from 9 to 7. And the only other change that would occur is in section F of that same section, where based on a reduced size that the quorum would move from 5 to 4. Is there a motion to adopt ordinance 230101?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilmember Mark Johnson, Councilmember Piscoya. Any discussion? Councilmember Henderson.
I just have a quick question. Is there anything that would not allow citizens to serve on more than one advisory body? Like if just to encourage folks to participate or?
Not necessarily.
No.
I don't believe there are any.
So somebody sits on another, like Port Commission, Planning Commission or something?
Yeah, yep. This particular commission has other requirements on trying to get members to fill certain slots. It has been difficult. I had some people step in and then step out rather quickly. And now with 7, we'll take another look at it and see if we can't. I have had 1 or 2 people express some interest, and we'll see whether or not we can fit them into the section the way it's envisioned here on consideration of the community. Roll call, please. Oh, I beg your pardon.
Question, sorry. Well, I was just gonna say, so former Mayor Beneville had kind of spoken to that early when I came on, basically saying that we try to get folks, more folks is better, but sometimes we do end up having some overlap because we're a small community, but good question. So in terms of how this will be implemented, so the next time a seat comes up as vacant, we will get rid of it, or what if that person is?
There are vacancies right now.
Okay, so current vacancies.
It will simply be that we figure out now whether there are 5 or 7 people already there, or whether we need to fill it. But I know there were at least 2, and I think a third, because one of the members actually took a job with the city, which then makes for ineligible. Roll call.
Councilmember Piscoya. Councilmember Topcott. Councilmember Henderson.
Yes.
Councilmember Doug Johnson.
Yes.
Councilmember Mark Johnson.
Yes.
Councilmember Martinson.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Then moving on to new business, we have resolution 230107. Mr. Clerk, will you read that by title, please?
R 230107, a resolution approving a letter of agreement between the City of Nome employee a resolution approving a letter of agreement between the City of Nome and the City of Nome Employees Association Local 641 APE AAFT AFL-CIO.
Thank you. Is there a motion to adopt resolution 230107?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Thank you. Councilmember Henderson, Councilmember Martinson. Mr. Manager, would you speak to the resolution, please?
Yes. We are hoping this makes some of our positions more competitive. And we also recognize that sometimes, for instance, the creation of Investigator 2 position, we have someone coming on far more experienced than we would pay as an Investigator 1. And then we are creating a custodian with security clearance. So they don't have any barrier crimes that prevent them working in sensitive areas of the city. And this eliminates the one-time regional difference of $500. I will say that I'm going to be coming with you for an increase for the exempt employees next meeting. I meant to have it on this one, but and I'm asking for your approval of this.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Councilmember Henderson?
So on number 7, this isn't offering anything additional beyond what's already in the existing agreements, or it is?
This is offering a one-time adjustment to their salaries based on the high in inflation and also competition that we are facing with other organizations within the community that gave substantial raises this year.
Of 3.8%.
Right.
So how, I guess,
I was getting confused with the bottom.
Well, the bottom is they already have their step increase based on their anniversary within the organization.
so the first part of Councilmember Henderson is covered in number 1 up here, where we're just moving one step, and then they move another step on their anniversary of 3.8, so it's the total of those.
We wanted to make very clear to the board, to their board, and to the non-exempt employees what this total was worth that the council had agreed, I was hoping the council would agree to.
What the total dollar amount is?
No, the total overall increase in your compensation package.
I think it's a great idea. Just curious, what's the dollar? Any idea what the total dollar?
The dollar number, the dollar number to rate, if we come forth with a proposal for all employees, is, Nikki, if I'm correct, it's around 275,000.
Okay. Thank you. There are no further questions. Roll call, please, on the adoption.
Councilmember Tapcock. Councilmember Henderson.
Yes.
Councilmember Doug Johnson.
Yes.
Councilmember Mark Johnson.
Yes.
Councilmember Martinson.
Yes.
Councilmember Piscoya. Motion carries.
Thank you. That moves us on then to our resolution 230108. Mr. Clerk, would you read that by title?
R 230108, a resolution endorsing projects for the City of Nome's 2023 state legislative priorities.
Thank you. Is there a motion to adopt resolution 230108?
Motion to adopt resolution R 230108.
Second.
Thank you, Councilmember Doug Johnson, Councilmember Martinson. Just to note in here a ministerial correction to the very last item, should read new teacher / public safety housing complex.
Mr. Mayor, could we also make some ministerial corrections and put dollar figures in these that we can put in after the fact, if that would be agreeable to the board, to the common council?
But it doesn't change the resolution intent. I don't see there's a problem with that.
There is an extraneous "the" before health and safety, another administrative error I would like to
Okay,
take care of.
all right.
Quick question. What the state incentives for new housing developments, I'm assuming that's targeted to the private sector. And is there a particular program in mind that through HFC or the state or something that we're looking at, or what's that about?
Well, I think as the discussion across the entire state is the shortage of housing, and how could the state help stimulate that, especially in areas where it's more expensive to develop. And it would be up to them to try to find those ways. I mean, you created your in-house incentives, okay, but we still are looking at a very high cost of a square footage, either new construction or even a remodel construction, and that was discussed at the summit this week ago, or over a week ago now, how high those costs are. What are the ways to what ways could the state government incentivize builders, whether it's tax credits or other things, to encourage them to go into more difficult areas to build.
So we're not looking for a specific number in terms of dollars, nor a specific program. We're just saying here, this is a need. Everybody knows there's a shortage of housing. Please
And that would be explained in a white paper that would be attached to this, that would have to be done if you approve this. You know, every one of these will have a paper attached explaining what is trying to be done here within this community. Like the teacher housing will probably include blueprints, so they know that, you know, there's been thought and design put into this.
So I think you said the time frame on this is pretty tight. It's got to be done for the next council meeting. Could we get, if we approve it tonight, can we get kind of those white paper details in the next just council meeting packages for
Right.
information purposes?
No problem. You normally get this packet. We just haven't, we haven't been able to go down to the legislature and fight these things, you know, or lobby for these issues. And we'll be looking at when you discuss the next resolution, we'll be talking about some lobbying that's going to be done hopefully in the near future.
Thank you. If there's not, Councilmember Thompson.
Yeah, sorry. I feel like I've asked this before, and I'm really sorry I don't remember the answer, but looking at this list, this seems to be more infrastructure based and capital project centric. And in the past, I thought we had included something along the lines of domestic violence and sexual assault. Is there a reason And again, I recognize we have a lot on here already, and I'm not necessarily looking to add, but is this supposed to be capital project infrastructure related, or is it more encompassing?
We did have that, you, go ahead, Glenn. You-
No, you can go, Mayor. I'll follow up because these are always the tough questions.
So in talking with the lobbyists again on the deal, the purpose of this particular thing was to identify projects that had money associated with them that could make it into CAPSIS. And then we did say, that there are several other things that are of concern to us. That, housing is a deal, although we, got it as a list and there will be a dollar number associated with it. Public safety has always been and continues to be, and that there are other, social issues within the community that would potentially require a legislative, change in statute or something in regulation, and that we could, that separating those into two separate processes, I guess, is what they recommended, that we have at least this thing for the capital needs addressed first.
So does that mean we're gonna have a second?
But I guess what.
Well, I think, this was one of the discussions that I was having, is normally you would go through the Alaska Municipal League to make sure that is your lobbying body on this. And that was my recommendation. I mean, while we still have a lot of our issues that I think are contributing to some of what we're seeing are issues that we're trying to address here. Housing, proper housing where people are not overcrowded. And, it's not, it'll be spelled out in the paper that we look at this as a way to address other issues within the community. Okay? And Mr. Mayor, I would really request that the council at least put teacher housing and water and wastewater as the number 1 and 2. So at least when, when someone looks at it, they know that this is a key priority. And I think when you're talking about housing, you need water and sewer also for the undevelopable lots at this point. And we definitely need teacher housing and public safety housing.
Can I request we also add the state incentives for new housing development and have a top 3?
That's, I'm just making my,
sector, so I'm throwing the request out there.
Yeah. As far as, I guess we had discussed not actually putting a number in front of them, but that in the listing of the order, we would expect that somebody would draw some kind of conclusion from that.
So something similar to that,
Yeah.
except there won't be a number. And it's number 1, so we can
Yeah, I mean, so anyway, there would be a little bit of a reordering. Is that not what?
that's
Yeah.
what would be looking for. Because I do look at it, people look at the first 1, 2, or 3, and they think they are the priorities for the community.
Can I request the state incentives for new housing development remain as number 1? That's what we're doing here now, is putting prioritizing, right?
I think
don't
all
think
three-
that had been anticipated that would be there, but what's the wishes of the council?
Just throwing it out there.
It is a recognized problem statewide, and definitely a no.
Okay, it'll be up there, very close to the top. How about that? Roll call, please.
Councilmember Henderson.
Sure.
Councilmember Doug Johnson.
Oh, no. Yes, I do.
Yes.
Councilmember Mark Johnson.
Yes.
Councilmember Martinson.
Yes.
Councilmember Piscoya.
Councilmember Tupcott. Motion carries.
Thank you. 230109, please by title.
R 230109, a resolution endorsing projects for the City of Nome's 2023 federal legislative priorities.
Thank you. Is there a motion to adopt resolution 230109?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Thank you, Councilmember Martinson, Councilmember Doug Johnson. Any discussion, Mr. Manager?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Actually, this was again discussed with our federal lobbyist, Jay Stern, and he recommends we follow this. He is also recommending that since Congress is now open to the public, that we, send a legislative delegation, which we have done in the past, which, we've been very fortunate the last year and a half that we've had a lot of folks come see us, but it's also good that we go in and talk with them and talk with some of the staff in person that works for our congressional delegation. So we're going to be looking at probably sometime, maybe if everything works out, in late February.
I guess the other thing besides just seeing our elected folks, traditionally there's a cadre of agencies that need to be visited as well, whether it be the Coast Guard, EPA, whoever it may be. That it's not just one day to see senators and Representative Patola, but also working in other direct contacts with our agencies that we're looking for help and partnership in.
Question. Similar to the question on the state priorities regarding housing, any particular program this is focused on, the second one?
Well, we were having,
just throwing out a big general statement.
excuse me, my fault. We were having a discussion whether this can go through potentially a designated legislative grant, whether it could go through actually DOJ for some funding for police housing, and through HUD for potential funds that would be there for teacher housing. So, and as the mayor indicated, our lobbyist is going to try to set up meetings with all these agencies so that we can directly talk with them and see how they can help us.
So the subsidies would potentially apply to both public and private sector projects?
Right.
Yes, all encompassing.
So is this something that the tank farm could be, that's a very big risk, and I don't know what the state of it is at the moment, but we spent a lot of money on that in Lansing. And moving it removes a lot of risk. And on my list of things that's community-wide, this money well spent. Seriously, infrastructure, like that. You could fall under some sort of federal map.
I think all of the things that we had on the city, on the state list, are the same things that would kind of be requested on the federal level. And, but again, seeing that some of those issues can be addressed through agencies and staff, Jay thought that it would be better just in, let's certainly make the delegation mindful of what the other ones are, and they take note and add and assign somebody on the thing, but we can add more to the list, but
Every year's working on this every day.
Well, I mean, it wouldn't hurt to have it on there, but,
I think that's why we put it in to the state funding, because we felt that there might be more support at the state level than at the federal level at this time.
yeah, as we're putting this together, I hadn't thought about it, but, we have a federal packet, we might as well just include our state list
We can do that.
in the same thing.
So they know what we're looking for overall.
We ready for a roll call on this? Mr. Clerk?
Councilmember Doug Johnson.
Yes.
Councilmember Mark Johnson.
Yes.
Councilmember Martinson.
Yes.
Councilmember Pistoia. Councilmember Topcock. Councilmember Henderson.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Moving on then to resolution 230110.
R230110, a resolution approving the purchase of 2 new Toyo stoves for use in the visitor center.
There's a motion to adopt resolution 230110.
So moved.
Councilmember Topcott, Councilmember Doug Johnson. I think it's self-explanatory.
It was in my manager's minutes.
Then you eat.
What is the reason for it though? I mean, I understand what the reason for it is, but why we have to pass
Yeah, why is this
a resolution to?
Well, this gets into the question of, I'm trying to be transparent and everybody knows what we're up to. And it was a lot of discussion within the organization, and I just felt, there's a lot going on. We're going to be coming forth. We've already told you about the furniture. And I just wanted, just to move forward and get this done. And make sure we're not doing anything without your overall knowledge and approval.
So we're gonna need a budget amendment for this?
Yes.
Not tonight.
Already knows
Roll
that.
call, please,
Yeah, roll call,
on this
please.
resolution. We're ready.
Councilmember Mark Johnson.
Yes.
Councilmember Martinson.
Yes.
Councilmember Piscoya. Councilmember Topcock. Councilmember Henderson.
Yes.
Councilmember Doug Johnson. Motion carries.
Okay, all the numbers the same except the last 11. Mr. Clerk, would you read that resolution by title only? 2301.
R230111, a resolution supporting full funding for the State of Alaska Harbor Facility Grant Program in the FY 2024 state capital budget.
Thank you. Is there a motion to adopt resolution 230111?
Make that motion.
Or second?
Councilmember Mark Johnson, Councilmember Henderson. Mr. Manager or Port Director, are there anything we need to know on this? I guess there's a supporting resolution or a supporting memo from the Vice Chair attached. Some people have committed to contribute in local match. We're not doing any actual formal.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. Other questions? Not the roll call, please, on the adoption.
Councilmember Martinson.
Yes.
Councilmember Piscoya. Councilmember Topcock. Councilmember Henderson.
Yes.
Councilmember Doug Johnson.
Yes.
Councilmember Mark Johnson.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. And finally, we have resolution 210113. Mr. Clerk, would you read that by title, please?
Mayor, there's another one,
Number 11.
number 12.
41, 42. Okay, I'm sorry, 12 then. So you're saying I missed 11?
No,
No, we just
That was 11.
And I called for 13, but I should have called for 12?
Yep.
Okay, all right. Please.
R230112, a resolution awarding a contract for evaluation and analysis of the City of Nome's 911 and radio communications system to Federal Engineering, Inc.
Thank you. Is there a motion to adopt resolution 230112?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Councilmember Henderson, Councilmember Doug Johnson. Mr. Manager?
This is to hire an engineering firm to do the analysis from a party that is not going to sell us hardware like we have received before, and tell us what we need to do to improve the communication systems, which we do know we are having problems with. And in fact, the software for the 911 system, we also know is 2007 Word. 2000. So it's, we're not sure whether we need additional repeaters to cover areas where communication.
Joy. Mute yourself, please.
Well, that was gray for a minute.
Thank you.
So this is to come in, have, and do an analysis. Then once this is done, then we could look at going out to bid to address the long-term solution. We've been talking about this for a long period of time. And I want to thank in particular Brian, and I want to thank Gray. And Gray has spent a lot of time on trying to deal with these radio issues. So we're asking for your support for this company.
So, I have a question.
Go ahead, Councilmember.
So I see you had a review committee, and I don't doubt the hard work the staff has done on this, and that we would support it, but what are we're basically approving for them to, intent to award, and we don't know what any of the numbers are?
Well, the award to come up and do the engineering study for us is going to be $59,850. And they will come up with a plan of what we need to do to put an RFP out to bid to address the shortcomings that we know we have in our radio system.
So we're approving tonight a contract for 59.
Right, 59,900. I'm pretty sure it's $59,850.
So they will review and determine what we need to ask for.
Right.
Any other questions?
How long is that expected to take before we have a proposal on the table to say, this is what we need to do, or this is what we need to buy?
I'm hoping once we award the bid, they can get up here very shortly.
The reason, I'm sorry, let me interrupt you. The reason I ask is it possible that we could include, if they come up with a recommendation, we could include it in this year's budget?
I don't want to make a promise on that, because we will be, they're not just going to come up here and not interact with us. We will be getting an idea, and I would probably be asking, what do you think we need to budget for our budget? And just for the next year's budget, but we already have set aside $500,000 for this project.
That's my question, thanks. No, I said that answers my question.
Oh, okay, sorry, okay, I thought you said one more question, sorry. All right, anything else? If not, yes, go ahead, Councilmember Piscoya.
John.
Okay, city clerk will answer that.
So the bids are a little bit more compact, especially for the boom. This was an RFP process where they gave us proposals as to how they were gonna do this. And they ranged from 20 to 40 pages each. And so for the interest in not giving you a 200-page packet, or I guess 200 to 300-page packet, I kept those out. And yeah, I apologize if that was a mistake.
They're available if somebody wants to come in and look at them.
I just have, sorry to interrupt. Was it the lowest bid or was it what I would call the most responsive or?
Well, it was evaluated based on experience, the principals working on it, and price paid, it was a percentage. So price was 20% of the overall values that we looked at. And this was probably more in the middle. There was a bid as high as 110 and a bid as low as 22.
Thanks.
But it was primarily a lot on experience and knowledge.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Piscoya. Councilmember Topcock. Councilmember Henderson.
Yes.
Councilmember Doug Johnson.
Yes.
Councilmember Mark Johnson.
Yes.
Councilmember Martinson.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Okay, that number, or lucky number 13 I was trying to get to, 230113 by title, please, Mr. Clerk.
R 230113, a resolution authorizing the city manager to reclassify a temporary position within the Department of Public Works Building Maintenance as a permanent full-time position.
Thank you. Is there a motion to adopt resolution 230113?
Second.
Councilmember Mark Johnson, Councilmember Henderson, Mr. Manager.
We have an employee that has done a very good job with us as a temporary employee. We'd like to add him on, especially as we're trying to do a lot of building maintenance projects, which we believe will save the city money versus having to go out and hire outside contractors. I think everybody has seen where the improvements at the mini, and there's still some work to do up there. And if anybody, I will make time, anybody wants to go over and see across the street, that'll be available. And we have in our sight lines to address our improvements in the rec center that are not ventilation related, from adding additional storage by removing some doors and adding doors, and also freshening up the lobby. And that doesn't also include a number of long-term neglected capital projects that we're trying to do right now. So while we have the staff and have the people available, we'd like to add this person on. 6 months from now, we could have a vacancy in the department, but right now I'd like to add on the extra personnel while we can get these projects continuing moving down the pipeline.
Thank you. Any further discussion, questions? Roll call, please.
Councilmember Topcock. Councilmember Henderson.
Yes.
Councilmember Doug Johnson.
Yes.
Councilmember Mark Johnson.
Yes.
Councilmember Martinson.
Yes.
Councilmember Piscoya. Motion carries.
Thank you. Mr. Morton, please.
Good evening, Ken Morton on behalf of Management Utilities.
Last Friday, we had 4 proposals come in on our battery energy storage system RFP that we have on the street. We're reviewing the proposals, trying to evaluate them for how well they meet the goals of the RFP and the available resources. It is also not the lowest price, but price is a component in the evaluation, of course. At the end of last year, federal budget included a project as an earmark at the behest of Senator McCaskey to fund some water and wastewater improvements. That money is being routed to the East 6th Avenue. It's the loop that will do the design from N Street to Great Khrushchev, from East 6th Avenue up to Great Khrushchev. So we'll do a pretty good initial design of the overall goal to loop utilities, and we'll use the money to extend water and sewer main as far as we can get it. It's a $1.6 million grant that requires 20% match. That match is being provided by Village of Solomon and the King Island Native community in a combined effort. Pretty neat thing. RFP for the design effort was issued last week, and that is underway. Last time I was here, I reported generator number 16 was down for a bit. We have the parts that came back in, and that is back up into operation. We're up and running at the power plant, all of our engines. Councilman.
No, I was going to go back to the house, the water and sewer loop.
Yes.
How many new housing sites will this create, or that are now? As a result of this funding?
So it's
How many
challenging question.
will be potentially could connect to the system?
That's a better question. Better question. 30-ish, I want to say. Is that correct?
I believe so. 30?
Right.
Wow. Good. That's it.
It only took 20 years.
Right?
I can speak from experience because 20 years ago I was going to build a home about midway down that lot. And some other organization was going to add the matching funds to that. I think it was housing. And we almost ordered that package. And I got a heads up from the utilities that says, before you order the package, you might be getting your own water and sewer for a while because the other housing funding fell through that match. So it's good to hear that it's coming to be, and then other people developed along that way also, to encourage that. So.
Great. Thank you. Mr. City Manager?
You have in front of you all the department reports and also the Port Commission meetings. You have my notes. I will say to let everybody know that I'm looking at engaging for a 6-month contract, a grants writer to assist us, and we'll see how that works out. The historic preservation plan has not been forgotten. I've been trying to get folks to work from the Native Alaskan Native community to review it and come back with any changes and recommendations. And we have been after Department of Homeland Security and Emergency Management to provide us the funding that we were promised to develop a new or updated historic mitigation plan. So I just want to let you know that has not been forgotten. That's pretty much it.
Great. Thank you. Then there are numerous other quarterly reports that are included in the packet. Are there any questions for the city manager?
Or your entire report, or just that one?
The entire report.
Do you have an update for the status of the ambulance department discussions that are available?
The ambulance department, they are making progress in the goals. And ironically, calls are down substantially this year. We're not sure why. I have asked the police department that they are to notify me and keep track how many times that they have to tone out for a response. So as part of our evaluation to see if they can handle the project. So that's where we are, and I keep working with the chief. I know that we are now up to 85 to 90% coverage, that they have someone on call with that. But as I've also said, the calls are down, and part of that is also in my report. Nest is not making as many calls as they were in the winter months for police and ambulance services. In fact, Nest has told me this is the quietest time that they've been operating the facility in the last several years, that they've not had a lot of outbursts, but some of that goes because they've done a new training program, which helps calm people down and to relieve tensions. So I'm not ready to make a recommendation to change, but I will put it as plain as that. I'm giving them the chance.
So we're going for the 10, I'm not asking for a final recommendation, obviously, tonight, but, so we're gonna try to basically, I assume, to keep it within the city and not look at, maybe shifting the responsibility over to North Central Corporation.
It may become part of the budget discussion this year. The one thing that I have asked Nikki to do, and we haven't really gotten much discussion into it, is really to break apart the two operations so we clearly understand how much we may be subsidizing the ambulance department.
One other question I've got is rabies. And I don't want to necessarily get into a debate about trapping within city limits because I know there's strong feelings on that, but my understanding is that trapping within city limits is prohibited by ordinance unless the city council designates a particular area with specific goals or targets. And I guess the question is, with the recent incident of a fox attacking, biting a child, and being positive for rabies, is there anything that we should be doing to address that? And I just throw out the idea of, targeted trapping within city limits to control the population.
I'm actually reaching out to a trapper to discuss what I would refer to as non-lethal trapping methods, and because some of the concern that was raised was trapping of animals and injuring them. So we want to look at that. I mean, obviously, I consider this a pretty serious situation of a rabid fox and an attack on a child. And thankfully, there were people there who immediately took action to kill the fox so that we could get a very quick rabies diagnosis. So I think I may have violated the rules last year under the safety of the city. At this point, we had foxes running up and down Front Street, and we knew where they were. So we put, traps to try to control them and move them outside of the city. But we knew where their den was.
So is it correct that the city council can say, I don't know, via resolution or otherwise, to say, okay, we want to initiate trapping and any parameters associated with that? That is the I guess, the council does have the ability to do that. Is that correct? Or Brian raised his hand earlier, he might have more.
Or you can amend the ordinance, which is probably the proper way.
Yeah.
That could fall under the animal control officer, right? You could temporarily deputize somebody as an ACO and.
Well, we do have an ACO, just so that's a contract position also.
At this point, the process is clear. Whoever wants to trap is supposed to get a permit from the city clerk. Special permits in the areas where trapping is not allowed is south of the Nome bypass, within 50 feet of a residence, 150 feet of a center line of a platted right-of-way, and et cetera, right down here. The last time this came up was a few years ago when Mr. McCann was looking to put some traps along the seawall, and the city council denied him the permit. But by resolution, you expressly say if people can trap south of the cruise check.
Okay.
So anybody is welcome to apply for these permits.
So the first one is they start with you and then.
Yep. And if it's in this area, then I punt it to you.
Okay. Understand. Thanks.
Okay, any other questions? Maybe add them to your council member comment. Oh, no, we need citizens' comments again. Sorry? Are there members of the public who would like to address the council this evening? You have the floor, Mr. Harrison. Thank you. All right, if nothing further then, roll call please for council member comments.
Councilmember Henderson.
Mr. Mayor, I think you said we have 45 minutes each here.
45 seconds.
I just wanted to see it.
Is there a second? That is not debatable with a second.
Just thought I wanted to see it. No, I actually, believe it or not, I only have one question. And it has to do with the Port Commission meeting minutes, so this may be addressed to Joy. There was some discussion, I don't have it right in front of me right now, but there was some discussion in, I think, the previous Port Commission meeting minutes that the city of Nome has to provide 4 acres, I believe, of ground for a man camp for, I think it was whoever the primary port contractor will be. And I guess I was just trying to understand that. Is that something that's required? Is that something we're just doing unilaterally? What is that?
We have to offer. I think that, 4 acres of land for them for the construction of a quote man camp. If they don't like our offer, then they can look at other pieces of property that could be available. Am I correct on that, Joy?
So at the present time, the requirement is to identify 4 acres of city-controlled property. City-controlled is the issue, correct? So I guess what I was just gonna say, council member, on that was that suitable city property is basically nothing at this point. Although we did come up with a site, which is up at the old state trailer.
We've got a couple sites
Yeah.
we're looking at. I mean, we're just trying to get more understanding before we identify a site that you will be told that we're looking at.
And the deal is, maybe there's some private, property around, so, I mean, the contractor, they're gonna go find the best deal for them in the process. So basically, we need to say, okay, this piece of city property is available should you choose to use it. And that doesn't force them to use it, it simply gives them that obligation. And then when they, they may say, thank you very much, but I went and saw, so-and-so over here that has a piece of property that's much more suitable. And the follow-up question, I think, is on what kind of housing is this going to be? And, at one point in time, we had some discussion that we've got a housing problem, and maybe when there's some housing built for port construction, that could serve a longer term use. But, a contractor, unidentified at this point in time, whether they will then come back to the city and say, hey, we'd like your help, or can you give us names of people, property owners, to be contacted, and maybe private wants it. But the city may, I guess, in my opinion, have some interest in what that contractor's proposal is, and whether it's something that, can it solve is this something that's just gonna be built for the port and torn down at the end? Or is it something that if it was constructed in some fashion, some layout, that it might be of interest as a housing stock moving down the road?
And whether that would involve the private sector partnering with the contractor or the public sector somehow getting involved. But I do know of one project that's going to require a man camp. We call a man camp, but it's going to be built to a much higher level so it can be converted to other uses after the project is finished. And, obviously housing is in desperate need right now. And, but this, we all have to remember, this is another year or 2 years out. But the goal is, the possibility of identifying land maybe the city wants to acquire for the development of this project. So, in terms of how much do you want to discuss in public, I mean, this might be an executive session discussion in the near future.
So you're obviously anticipating my question, was why is the city the primary entity, at least initially, looking at this in terms of instead of the private sector? And the reason I bring this up is I've had conversations with multiple entities that may have private parcels that may have an interest in this. Typically, when you have a big project, it is the contractor's responsibility, to go out and secure housing. And if the city wants to do something to say, okay, if you're the primary contractor, you have to provide your own housing. But my question is by the city inserting itself in the primary role, are we sort of relegating the private sector who may have desire and the ability to develop a parcel for all the same things that you discussed? Or why is the private sector taking a back seat to that?
We are not inserting us in, this is being requested by the government.
So the federal government requested that the city of Nome provide, just listen for a minute, Glenn,
actually requested specifically the city of Nome, instead of just saying, we want to make sure the contractor has the ability to provide housing for its own folks. I think, do you understand the difference?
I understand that, and I think that's, you know, the issue is if the private sector doesn't come up with property, they want to make sure the city, who is the ultimate owner of this port project, we are also making it very clear and to the Corps, and the Corps has heard it very clear from our residents. The fear is that this port project is going to take away housing from the general public, our public, and we have, said, I think throughout since my time here is, if this project is developed, it is not going to have what we believe an impact on the local residents taking that housing, like the developer coming in, I need 50 housing units. And then all of a sudden we have 50 families displaced to do that. And the other issue is, I've heard this very loud and clear, is the private sector was supposed to step up for projects in Fairbanks, for construction up there for military assets be located there, and the private sector didn't step up. And now they have 2 air wings there, where what they're having to do, the families of those pilots and support staff have no place to stay. So they're having people come up 12 months at a time, no family, and then replacing them 12 months. And I think there has been some concern on this, and they want to make sure that the government, the Nome government, at least offers them 4 acres. Developer doesn't have to accept it. I mean, the contractor doesn't have to accept it. He may want to negotiate with some private business owner or a resident, but they want to know there's going to be at least 4 acres. If that other side doesn't happen, that these are 4 acres.
I don't know what happened in Fairbanks. Here's my request. We've got a year to do this, right? We've got a year, I think, what Joy said before.
No. This is much shorter.
Okay, so my recommendation is that if this is a requirement to provide 4 acres with whatever requirements are, that the city put together some kind of a process, RFP, our request for information about potential opportunities for the private sectors to potentially provide this requirement, man camp, pad, whatever the case may be. And if the private sector is unable to do that, then the city would then step in to provide that. I'm concerned that the city is getting ahead of itself and potentially relegating the private sector to not be able to take advantage of opportunities here. And I would like to see that the private sector has that ability to do that. Does the city have that flexibility within this RFP?
Well, we're going to have to speak with the Corps of Engineers on what they want. And as I wanted to mention, as I mentioned earlier, is that's a minimum of 4 acres that they're looking for, that we would be able to offer them a clear location that we've identified. And if it's not acceptable to the contractor, maybe our location is too far away from the port project. That others, they would have it, the private sector would also be eligible to be negotiating. Now, I think it's I think it's a legitimate request to make of the Corps, but we have a $400 million project getting ready to start, and I don't want us to be dealing, and I've learned this after the fact, after this offer that they asked, because of their history of what happened in other communities up here where the private sector could not step up and provide the needs.
I understand that we haven't even given the private sector an opportunity to respond. This is the first I've heard of it.
And it would be the Corps of Engineers. The city of Nome would not be the party that was out doing that.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying if we can make,
whatever, if we need to advocate to the core, at least give the private sector an opportunity to submit proposals to be able to do this. Because if the private sector do it, then we're building on our tax base, something that we can build on in the future. If the city develops something, it doesn't increase the tax base necessarily. So, I would like to see the private sector have a seat at the table for an opportunity like this. And I appreciate your time here, John, but I would like to think the private sector have an opportunity here.
Go ahead. Yes, please. Kind of the other, I guess one of the other thoughts again was, gee, yeah, there might be the private sector folks that are out there that are, have something available. The city could go through an RFP right now and ask, this is X, Y, and Z that is needed. Do you want to make a proposal on it? But then that proposal, unless the party making that proposal, are they going to agree to have their property available in 2 years and just hold on to it right now? Because again, it doesn't, then when it comes down to the contractor, then the contractor, we could have gone out and found what we thought, based on community input, this is the perfect piece. But the contractor's under no obligation to use it. That seemed to be the dilemma. So I hear where you're thinking, and we tried to think through that too, but seemed to get blowback from the core.
Well,
We can ask again.
I would appreciate it, and I think that the private sector, we've all talked about development and adding to the tax base and opportunities in housing, and for the private sector to be left out of this opportunity, or at least the appearance that we're being left out of the opportunity, is not right. And I think that throughout this project, there's going to be a lot of money spent, and there's going to be a lot of jobs created in projects. And I think the more that we can do to engage the private sector in some of these opportunities, the better. Thank you, John.
Thank you. I think we're next.
Councilmember Doug Johnson.
Nothing.
Councilmember Mark Johnson.
I don't have anything either. I was going to yield my time to ask Joy her comments on it, but she already made those. So. To help with that discussion.
Councilmember Martinson.
I don't have anything.
Councilmember Piscoya. Councilmember Topcock.
I got comments. First of all, EFAC lesson of the night. Kuvia Nagli Ukiuchak. So happy New Year. Since I missed the last meeting, I apologize for that. I was visiting family in the hospital and flights got wonky. Anyway, super excited about the potential for the hookups on East End and the work that King Island Native Community and Village of Solomon are doing. I think that just really highlights how important it is for us to be working with our tribal partners on these projects and our respective priorities. So really glad to see that happening and hope that we can continue to keep open and clear communication lines between each other with that. And speaking of partnering with tribes, any timeline on advancing that ordinance?
Well, you came after you had your vacation, and I was stuck someplace. So if you have time to come in and visit so we can get that, just let me know.
Okay.
I will be willing to come in on a Saturday too.
Okay.
Since I usually am here.
I'll probably have time Friday afternoon if you want to do Friday afternoon. I'm trying to avoid working weekends. Okay, that's all I've got.
Youth Representative Miller.
Nothing.
Mayor?
Thank you. The city manager in his report mentioned the activities that were ongoing here this last week down at the Nome Convention Center with Claire putting together a leadership summit and then with the Denali Commission a follow-on meeting on jobs. And it was a great opportunity, I think, for folks to, while there were great speakers to listen to, a lot of what happens in these meetings, I think, are the partnerships or the introductions that you can make in them. And as a result of some of the visits, there has been now some additional discussion between Nome, King Island, Village of Solomon, and ANTHC on seeing how we can potentially partner and tap into funds that could benefit the community as a whole in a partnership in just our water and sewer thing was the discussion. So the next will also be to follow on with USDA, but HFC is looking right now at, ANTHC is looking right now at what kind of an agreement can be put together with the tribes and Nome to develop, it used to be called a master plan, and now they like to call it a preliminary engineering report, to develop, further develop some of the things that have been on the master plan, but had no funding source and had not moved to design. So we're talking about the possibility of financially partnering with ANTHC in order to get some of that work done that will allow the tribes to insert us in some of the other systems through Indian Health Service and the like that we don't as a community development. So, there's some good things that happened after that meeting and we're excited about that. I do want to thank COERIC. University of Alaska Fairbanks here was involved as well in putting this together, and the Denali Commission. There were quite a few folks working on the planning and organization of this, something they tried in, I think it was 2020, and then COVID came in, but they had printed bags for the thing anyway that said 2020 on it. And then luckily they didn't reprint them when they thought they were going to do it in 2022 because we had a storm, because it didn't happen until 2023. Anyway, they were real nice bags, and we were glad to get them. Great to see so many people from the villages that through COVID have not necessarily had the opportunity, and it just was a good week and good time and some great speakers. And again, thank you to all those organizations for putting it together. Thanks to Public Works for all they're doing, and Cole for working on the heat. I know it's not his fault that we're all sitting here shivering, but thank you, Cole. Appreciate you keeping all the balls in the air all over, and thanks to your crew as well. Chief Bob, we're good to see you here this evening. Thank you for sitting through. We appreciate the police report that was provided here, and I think I'm I'm not gonna say excited, satisfied, but appreciative that out of the number of sexual assault cases that have been listed here as happening in 2022, that the majority of them have been referred or resolved, and that there are only a few open cases sitting there. So thank you to you and your people.
I'll pass that on, thank you.
I thought I was gonna bring up something, but it ends up I don't need to, about Alaska Airlines and Iditarod, and DOT and keeping our airport open, but all that got resolved, and a flight so that we can try to keep as many people in Nome during the Iditarod banquet and the Iron Dog banquet, just because we don't have as much housing available here, that they are going to move the evening flight so that it won't leave before like 11 p.m. So that people that come in the morning and hopefully can celebrate just for one day because they can't find housing, that they'll have that opportunity to participate. So thanks to Alaska Airlines, thanks to DOT, and for working out those differences. Crystal is on top of it, and all is good for that labor. That's it, I believe, and we don't have any reason to stay after. So unless there is objection, the meeting is adjourned, and it's 8:37 p.m.
Is there an executive session?
No, there isn't.
If we just,
It's just listed as a
Listed.
placeholder. Should we choose to add? Thank you to Bryant and the staff